And we are live.
Yep, there we go.
Hello, everybody.
Kyle, yeah, he had to get a timeout. He said some things in the last product lab that were too spicy, and we had to give him a timeout. So he's not on this one. All right, but the people who are on this one, myself, Chris Bisnett, and today we got Matt joining us.
Hello.
So we got 100 and some people. Let's
Can,
jump
can
into
we
this.
can we kick it? Yes, we can.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
let's do it. All right, so some things we're going to talk about today. Pretty similar format. We're going to talk about kind of some of the new stuff that we have launched, new feature development, things like that. That's what we usually do in the straight out of the lab. We're going to give an update on Microsoft 365. So if you've been following, we've been putting in a ton of work and a ton of effort, both on the engineering side as well as on the SOC and the threat detection side. So Matt's going to cover a lot of that. If you remember, we didn't do a product lab in December because it would have fallen kind of between Christmas and New Year's, and we felt like that was probably just not going to get that much attendance. So the last one was actually in November. But when we asked people what they wanted to hear about, and pretty much everyone said SIM. So we're going to have a section on SIM, and we'll have a nice announcement there, I think, for you. And then a part of that SIM is MDR for logs, and then we invite you to, join in the fun. So let's get into it. We talked a little bit before, but we got a bunch more people on now. I'm curious, where is everybody from? Where are you watching? Um, any interesting blogs or security topics that you've seen recently? You're from China. Great.
China. That is
Uh,
that's a fantastic answer, Tim.
yeah, I, I I feel amazing that they would just let us, on the internet in China. That seems like a problem for them.
San Diego, Albany. Oh yeah, Scott, Albany. I'm over in Syracuse, Scott. I'm a little north of you.
Oh, Syracuse. Are you still buried in snow or
Yeah, it's
how's
it's
that?
actively it's actually like there's this like beautiful light snowfall going on right now. It's
Oh,
picturesque.
nice. Nice.
You're from NordVPN. Oh.
Nice. All right. So let's get into some of the new stuff. Um, we got an update here to some of the curricula stuff. You can now sign in with your Microsoft 365 single sign-on, which is nice. You don't have to do a separate login, which is always good for people. I always love when I can have fewer logins and fewer stuff to remember. So just minor update there, but we thought we'd point that out. The SOC threat report. So this is the report that we refer to as the "What have you done for me lately" report. We're always updating this. This actually started out when we first made this. It was only 2 pages long. This was the first page, and then there was a second page, and that was really it. And over the years, we've added on stuff to it as we added on capabilities and features to Huntress, like processes and ransomware canaries and all kinds of stuff. We continued to add on to it. In this case, we actually did a an update. For a while, this was really only tracking like auto runs, so services and drivers and stuff, and we would tell you how many of those there were. But since then, we've added in processes and um, defender events and all kinds of other stuff. So it no longer made sense to just focus on the auto runs. So we've updated it to talk about just events that have been collected across all the different pieces, and then number of signals that have been generated and investigated and that kind of stuff. So for us, a signal is any time when one of our detectors flags something as either known to be bad or maybe bad, suspicious.
Hmm.
So the command center is a new one. So this is kind of our
Yeah.
new take on the dashboard. There was some stuff, and again, it needed to kind of a revamp with all the new tooling and stuff. So there's some interesting stuff in here. Did you provide input and stuff on this, Matt?
Yeah, and so I'm actually because I do a lot of like proactive threat research too. So I'm in the command center now a lot of the time. So yeah, the difference between like what the dashboard used to look like and how it is now, it's just the UX team, UI team really put a lot of effort into this. It's super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, we really tried to bring in like what are the pieces that you would care about? How do we make those front and center? You know, how do we show you all
Yeah.
the information that you need to up front without overwhelming you, right? And I think the UX team did a really nice job. We brought some more color into it to try and show you, you know, anything red you probably want to review. Anything that's green is good to go. So
I love, and it goes back to kind of the previous slide that you just showed. I love the flow of signal to investigation to report because that's such a big part of the like whole ecosystem here in that, you know, it gives partners a really good idea of the volume that we're dealing with here, where there are so many signals, but only a certain number of them will ever make it to a full-blown report. And so that really kind of like you were saying, you know, what have you done for me lately? Well, you know, we're dealing with just all this absolutely insane volume of data so that we can actually find the evil that's hidden in the sands.
yep. Yep. And that's always the tricky part, right? Is
Yeah.
like how do you find out of all the stuff, how do you find the stuff that's you know, the most valuable,
Yeah.
the signal amongst the noise.
Because there's a lot of crap out there that's just not worth an analyst, a SOC analyst time, right? And so that is
100%.
like, you know, just getting the really high quality, and we'll speak a little more about this in the M365 part, but yeah, getting the high quality signals over to the SOC is just so important.
Yeah. And then, you know, for a lot of customers are when they first show up to Huntress, they're kind of in that mindset of like, if it's not pinging me a lot of stuff, it's not doing anything. So they kind of want to like see that all the stuff going on. So we kind of really have to, you know, talk through that with folks and say, hey, look, like there's always a lot of stuff going on. Ideally, you only see the stuff that needs your attention.
Yeah.
So this goes, you know, toward getting that. So let's get into the Microsoft 365 stuff because we got a lot of it.
All right. All right. So I used to play, I was talking to Chris this morning when we were, you know, mocking up these slides. I used to play a lot of real-time strategy games, right? And so among those was one of the most famous real-time strategy games, which is StarCraft, right? And so, as a principal security researcher, and most of my research, actually, like all of my research right now, is focused on MDR for M365. I feel like I'm living out a gigantic real-time strategy game. I feel like I'm in a big StarCraft match that's spans the entire globe, right? And so every time, my job is basically to find new ways to get high quality signals to our SOC for threats that they can investigate or refine the current capabilities, right? And look at like the difference between, well, when we think we should see something but we don't actually see something, what do we need to be able to see something, right? So every time we get some like new tech like this, I feel like we're playing StarCraft and I just got another upgrade for my units, right? And so some of the new tech, some of the upgrades we're about to go over here. First one I want to talk about is the VPN usage improvements and enrichments, right? And so this was one of the big guns that I feel like we just brought out to the field. And so I adorn this with the battle cruiser operational GIF there. And so this is per user identity metrics based on their VPN usage patterns, right? Battle cruiser operational. There you go. So per user, per identity, at the identity level and at the per event level, we're now crunching numbers on different VPNs and their usage. So an example of this is that if we see a user that has never even maybe heard the word VPN, much less used one before, and then we see a VPN login, a successful VPN login to M365, that is enough to cause a signal to send to our SOC and investigate on that alone, right? So we're crunching numbers at the identity level, and then for VPN users at the event level, when an event comes in for like NordVPN, we're going to look at the statistics for that user and say, okay, so they are using NordVPN right now, but out of all of their events where we've seen VPN usage, how many of them were that particular VPN for Nord? Is it 99%? Okay, they're probably fine in that case, right? But when we see something like, okay, out of all of the usage, this user uses Surfshark, and now we see Hide My Ass VPN, and that's the only time that we've seen it. That's also cause for concern. So there's like two different levels here, where there's the identity level, which is that if you have a propensity to use VPNs in the first place, that we're tracking that. Also, we're tracking the different VPN providers and types of VPNs. And those are more lasers in the hallway that a threat actor would have to dance around in order to carry out an attack or an account takeover. For a report from our SOC, 75% of malicious activity for M365 comes from VPNs, right? But people use
Yeah.
VPNs all the time. So we can't say VPN is bad. We need to get more nuanced and more subtle with this. We were already doing this with location enrichments. We were enriching our data based on locations. And then we kind of realized that we can't really treat location and like geolocation of IP in a non-VPN login and VPN information. We can't really treat those as the same thing. So that's one of the biggest ones. So battle crews are operational there. We got big guns out on the field now to take out and squash threat actors as they are performing, trying to perform account takeovers. So identity age count, another one and I love this one because it's so simple, but it's like a total game changer. And I love when we put little tiny, and not to minimize the work that went in to get this online, but the concept itself is very simple. And so we've got the siege tank there, identify target. This is the count of days that an identity has been active in M365. So we have both when they're onboarded, but maybe somebody onboards and they don't take the job until maybe a month or two later. But as soon as they kind of like start their actual activity for that identity, we start to count the days, right? And so this allows us to apply scrutiny to identities that may have joined Huntress and already be compromised. So we get to look at their, in this case, we'll go back to the VPN usage. We get to look at their VPN usage from day one through a predetermined amount of time in the future, and just look at all that and prioritize the signals based on that time frame. But then they phase into the second part, which is once we have baselined their activity, once we get a really good sense of the VPNs that they use, if any at all, and like the locations that they log in from, we can then bring the hammer down when we see things that are outside of that baseline, right? And so we could not do that before because the date field in our detection engine is not malleable at all. It's anybody that's ever tried to do any like date wrangling with data types, it's a nightmare. Do you have to string parse it? Who knows? But we have a simple integer count of just how many days has this identity been active in here. And then when we see things, so my example here is that Kyle, we all know that our beloved CEO has a NordVPN sponsorship. That's maybe not true exactly, but I just made that up. But let's say he did, right? And so if Kyle has a NordVPN sponsorship, he always uses NordVPN, right? We'll see that the first time when his account has been onboarded into Huntress, we'll see that, we'll flag it. We'll say, hey, we see NordVPN. Is that suspicious? And he goes, no. I've got a sponsorship. You know, I got money coming in for NordVPN. Don't worry about it. And we go, okay, totally fine. The SOC triages that, and that's not an incident. That's maybe a benign true positive. But then like 45, 50, 60, 180 days later, we see Kyle's identity accessing his tenant from Hide My Ass VPN. And then we talk to him and we say, hey, did you get a Hide My Ass VPN sponsorship? And he's like, no, I've never heard of that in my life. And we're like, that is suspicious. And we trigger that as well. So the cool thing is that it allows us to play around with the priority and the intensity of the response here. So whereas early on we get to scrutinize, but maybe we don't like bring the hammer down, later on when the identity has onboarded and it has enough of a baseline, we can drop the hammer on them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and some of this we added because we started adding some more of these things like VPN detection and stuff like that. And as people were first like onboarding, you couldn't tell if it was normal or not, right? And also the analyst, we've got almost 1 million identities, in the database. the analysts didn't know, like, is this normal for this user? Is it not? Did they just on board? Have they already been there? So a lot of this helps just to bring some of that additional context for the analyst, so they can start to say, oh, yeah, it is NordVPN, but this user just onboarded yesterday. So like this might be okay. Like this
Yeah.
might be the norm. We just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And so bringing in that context allows them to make um, more decisions and better decisions without just having to do a blanket, oh, everything is bad, right?
Right. Yeah, because that's untenable, and our SOC knows that, and we know that. You can't just the technologies that allow legitimate use are also abused by attackers. So you can't just say
Yep.
VPN equals bad. So we got power overwhelming here. That's our Archon, the High Templar fusion into the Archon here. We've got power overwhelming for anomalous location improvements. We already had this capability, but we were using it kind of, I would say, inelegantly. And so lately, improvements have been made to the detectors that work on location. To I think one of the big things that we learned, like I said a little earlier, was that you can't really combine VPN detectors and location detectors and treat them kind of equivalent. They should be treated as different data sources because they really are. The shorthand for this, which one of the software architects brought up, is like, isn't VPN a location in and of itself? Because you can just change your physical, like your geographical location can change wildly every time you connect to a VPN. So that's not real. Like you'll get really low quality data if you use location data streams when you're examining VPNs. So one of the big things was that we split them, and we've refined our detection capabilities so that VPN detectors go after VPNs and location detectors go after locations. And so one of the other enrichments that we've recently put online was that Microsoft, when you onboard an account, requires you to set a default location, and the default location is used for like tax purposes or like compliance reasons or something like that. But basically, it's just a place that you have to say, yeah, most of the time either my company is here or I'm here. And so we've got another like very simple, again, just a nice little simple piece of tech that really changes the game. A nice simple field that says, for any given event, for a login event for this identity, is this coming from the same place as their usage location? And though you can't really tell that there's malicious activity going on just by that fact alone, it's all about creating a picture. It's all about pixels, right? You put enough pixels together, you're going to start to see something. Um,
Yep.
the other big thing here was the impossible travel proof of concept. And so the impossible travel proof of concept has continually been refined. We're generating signals that we're sending to the SOC to gauge the effectiveness of how good impossible travel is as an indicator. And we're still seeing that it supports our previously asserted hypothesis that impossible travel is a part of the game, but it's not like the most important thing. If you're overlapping your fields of fire here, if you're overlapping your detectors, impossible travel is one piece of the pie. VPN abuse is one piece of the pie. Malicious application additions, one piece of the pie. MFA addition, one piece of the pie. There are all these different like things that you have to look at to build the threat picture, and impossible travel is one of those. So we're getting that capability. We're refining, and hopefully we'll soon get that capability fielded out into production.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we're looking for is like account takeover, right? And
Yep.
anomalies there. And yes, most people refer to it as impossible travel or whatever. That's just kind of what people have been conditioned to ask about and to know about. But yeah, so for a lot of these, whether it's the location data or the VPN stuff, we're using the IP address where the user is coming from and looking that up in our data to figure out like what VPN is that associated with, or what's the geographic location of that. And it's pretty good, but it's not perfect, right? Like the
Right.
VPN providers, they don't like publish a list and say these are all our IP addresses. And IP addresses move around all the
Yeah.
time. So that we can only be so good because the data is kind of imperfect. So we have to try to bring in a lot of stuff. And like Matt said, sometimes the location itself is not anomalous enough that we got to look at like what else is happening, what else is the user doing, are there other behaviors that are anomalous, right? If it's
Yep.
maybe a slightly different location, city has changed, but same state, but now we're seeing them like add, administrative users. Like, well, okay, maybe we should look into that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's just these are all capabilities that are coming online like one by one that all kind of like again, it's there's no like end state of the detection of the set of detection capabilities. It's all just placing more lasers in the hallway that a threat actor would have to ballet dance over and when they make mistakes, they fall into one of those lasers and then we get to, bag them and tag them and rip them out of the environment. But like
Yep.
always, we must construct additional pylons here. We're not going to get to the end of this. There are so many other things, so many other threads to pull on and avenues that we could take for M365. And finding one of the big things that we're trying to do right now is find the right balance of signal that we send to our partners. By nature of the data set and by nature of the technology, the false positive and benign true positive rate for M365 tends to be a bit higher than what we see on the endpoint. And right now, we're really trying to get that, let that rate fall to where it needs to be so that our partners are not going to start to get inundated with the signals and say, yeah, we already know about this. Yes, thank you, and start to tune us out. And that's the last thing that we want because when we send them a signal that actually matters, the last thing that we need is for them to say, yeah, Huntress is kind of noisy. I mean, this is probably just no big deal. And then we've got a business email compromise on our hands and something like that.
Right.
So,
But it's also tricky because on the other side, there's a lot of our customers who've been with us for a long time and they're used to a very low, almost zero false positive rate. So when they get stuff from Huntress, they jump into action, right? And so if
yep,
we are too kind of noisy, too trying to just show them more stuff, suddenly people are jumping into action. Oh, it wasn't anything. Shoot. So
right.
we really gotta stay on it to make sure that we got our shit right.
Yep. And there are activities like when a threat actor makes an inbox rule and it has like two dots as the name and it's moving emails to the RSS feed or something like that. Like that's like or like a threat actor logs in from Tor, right? Like there are
Yeah.
things that are like dead to rights, we've got you. But then there are gray areas like somebody logged in with a VPN. We don't know. It's the context by which that we need to examine that. So there could be evil at foot, or there could not. Like if you repeatedly cry wolf, people are going to start to tune you out. So you have to be careful about that. Um, and then like one of the things everything that I do here at this company is in service to the SOC. And so one of the things is that I treat them as a partner. So the same care and attention to make sure that our partners don't receive a crazy deluge of incoming signals and reports. I extend the same care to the SOC, and so they're one of the centers of gravity here, and the rate at which signals hit the SOC is extremely important to get right. And so they're like one of our actual partners. So my job basically is to refine existing capabilities or create new capabilities that get the absolute best possible leads to the SOC so they can do what they do best, which is, turn cyber criminals into examples, rip them out of networks and look cool while doing it. Um, and yeah, for the more pylons we need to construct, there's tons of other stuff that we have in the pipe here. But yeah, some of it just adversary in the middle deterrence and detection, persistence, MFA, rogue MFA edition, session awareness. That's something that you've been working on, Chris. I know that.
Yep.
For sure, refining our credential stuffing detectors. The V1s on those are very, very noisy, and we were using the enrichments a little inelegantly. So, continual refinements of those detectors should make the signal ratio a lot better. And just
Yeah.
more lasers in the hallway, more ways that we can trip up cyber criminals and catch them on the way to wherever they're trying to go before they have the chance to wreck our partners.
So someone asked, what is credential
Oh,
stuffing?
yes, of course. One of my favorite red team techniques. All right. So credential stuffing is in the class of attacks that are kind of related to like password spraying and brute forcing, but credential stuffing is a very particular type of password attack. So let's say that I, as a cyber criminal or a red teamer, peruse the breaches that have accrued out in the dark web somewhere, and I find that Chris has a breached account in one of these breaches, and I see it's, C Bisnett at gmail.com or something like that. And I see that his password is there as well because it got breached in some other incident. So I'll take that set of credentials and I will try to stuff those credentials into other services where Chris might have an account or I know he has an account. So for example, let's say that his breached password was for Gmail, but I know that he logs into like REI, or maybe he logs into like Bank of America, or maybe he logs into any number of other or if appropriately in this case M365, any other service. I'll try to take those credentials and stuff them into that service. And so we have detectors in place, although they are quite noisy and we're refining them to make them better. We have detectors in place that identify when one of two things happens. Either MFA saved the day, right? MFA got in the way and stopped an authentication from happening, and that authentication has some deviation from the user's baseline. Either it's coming from a weird VPN or a weird location. We get to say, though we can't really prove anything, we get to say to the partner, if you can't account for that, it's likely that that was a credential stuffing attack. Somebody used a password and used it against your account, and you should probably, even though nothing happened, MFA saved the day here. If they're using it, some don't. I know you're out there. MFA got in the way, you should rotate your credentials because they're probably in a breach somewhere and you should change them out. And so either an MFA interrupt like that or a conditional access policy block. These are, think of them like firewall rules for M365 and Azure. They're basically ways to lock down the authentication in an Azure tenant to say, hey, if you're outside of the United States, you cannot log in. That's kind of draconian. That's not a particularly good one. It could work for some people, but it's all about just the individual tenants and what they want. But that's a conditional access policy block that basically says, hey, I saw you log in with correct credentials, but you're logging in from somewhere that's not
Russia.
Yeah, like Russia or China or like, and it's these locations are not, it's not the particular locations that are important. It's the like either the conditional access policy was set up so that it allow lists certain places or deny lists other places. But basically, at the end of the day, the conditional access policy says, nope, sorry, you're not logging in. We can alert off that and say, somebody probably has your credentials. They were stopped by a conditional access policy. You might want to go rotate your creds. So we've got those detectors online, but they're very noisy, and we've got to refine them to make them better so that they're easier to handle by our SOC, and they make for higher quality signals for our partners.
Yeah. So Jan asked, if we see things moving into the RSS feed, shouldn't we disable the account, not just remove the rules? And the answer is kind of yes and no. So what we always have to do is try to balance the like being security aware and being paranoid with like the realistic stuff, right?
Right.
So if we're looking at an account and we see an RSS feed, we see a rule that exists. There's two ways that it could happen. It could be a rule that existed before the person was onboarded into Huntress, or it could be we saw it get created today, right? And so there's two paths here. If we see it get created today, we know that something's up and somebody has access to the account today, right now, right? And so from that case, we can then start to say, hey, lock this down, lock out the account, terminate all existing sessions, all of that, right? We can go much more like harder at that account because we know something's bad's happening. Versus if we just onboarded somebody today and we went and pulled all the existing inbox rules and we see there's this one that's like sketchy moving stuff into there, we don't know if anybody still has access to that. And we could go and lock it out. We could go really strong at it and lock it out. And some people would be happy about it, some people would not. So what we try to do is, again, balance it, add in our human capabilities where we'll say, hey, let's just disable that rule and let's look at the other stuff that's happening with the account to decide whether or not there's other malicious stuff happening. Because it could be left over from some previous breach. Maybe they kicked that attacker out, the user's already changed their password. So these are the places where we always have to try to exercise like the right amount of action.
Yeah. And there are still instances. So again, detection and instant response is a continuum, right? So there are still places where activity from like anonymous sources like Tor an RSS rule from coming from Tor is probably enough that we can drop the hammer on it, right? Like that, like unless someone has an established pattern of using Tor in their day-to-day duties, which we can now tell, right? Um, when we see things like that, that goes to the top of the priority list, and we can drop the hammer on it. But then there are more gray areas. So yeah, it's all about like finding the. It's a continuum, and we want to find the necessary force without going overboard, which can be very tricky.
Yep. Um, all right, let's go on to talking about a managed SIM. So we've kind of had this discussion internally a number of times around are we or are we not a SIM, right? And the problem that we always run into is if you just go Google it, what is a SIM? You'll find 10 different definitions on 10 different websites, right? Everybody's got their own definition. If it's a vendor, it's tailored to what they're selling, right? They define SIM as what they got. Other people define SIM differently. It's really kind of vague, but the basics of it is like you need to have some central place where you're bringing in all of your security data that can be investigated, audited, reviewed, reported on, all of that kind of stuff. And so when we look at like Huntress, we say, well, we're doing that, right? We're pulling in EDR data, we're pulling in M365 data. It's being investigated, it's being reported on, it's being reviewed by a human. We seem to check like largely all the boxes for what like SIM would be defined. There's really only one that we don't check, and that's kind of log collection. But everything else seems to check the box. So we started to say like, what don't we have? Or how are we different? Well, we don't store all the data, right? We don't collect absolutely everything, every user activity. There are some systems out there, whether it's like a Splunk or Microsoft Sentinel or something like that. They're going to try to collect absolutely everything and have a record of it, and that's great, but it's very expensive from that perspective. And then you have to think about like how long are you going to retain it? Can it be searched? Is it just available in cold storage only? How do you handle all that? So there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into like what is a SIM and what is it not. So we think we're pretty close there actually. So, we talked about kind of the mutually exclusive, right? There's the like capture everything, and then there's the like, how do I make it like affordable, right? And those kind of go against each other because more data you capture, the more data you gotta process. Some more CPU time you gotta have, the more storage you gotta have. All of those go into what generally equates to a SIM being very expensive. So the end result is kind of expensive. So this is actually pricing from Blue Mira. Some of the other SIMs are harder to get pricing for. Like if you try to get pricing for Splunk, they just say like contact us, talk to a salesperson. But it gets pretty quickly expensive just because of the amount of work you got to do. So what does that mean for us in terms of like the Huntress SIM? So we have this security platform. We're managing it. Therefore, we think of it as a managed SIM tailored to the needs of the SMB, both in terms of capabilities, but also cost. So if you're looking for AV and EDR, we got you. MDR for endpoints. If you're looking for aggregating data and your logs and all that, well, we got MDR for logs, which we'll talk about in a minute. You want to protect your SaaS account. We got MDR for identities. Today, this is really just focused on Microsoft 365. That's what Matt was just talking about. But the longer term vision for that is that it starts to encompass a lot more. right? So we'll start to encompass things like how do we help you configure Microsoft 365 better? How do we help you understand all the places where your users are logging into, right? All that third-party SaaS apps. I don't know about y'all, but I think we have more than 250 SaaS apps that
Yeah.
Huntress uses. That's like almost one SaaS app per employee.
That's the
Like that,
sprawl is just absolutely incredible. And
yeah,
like
it's
and then
wild.
it's an administrative nightmare too, because then you're like, okay, well, how many apps do I not, what's the shadow IT of SaaS apps? How many apps are out there
Yep.
that my employees have signed into that I don't know about? Yeah, wild stuff.
Right.
Can't wait till we get
Yeah.
started on that.
Yeah, and they make it easy, intentionally, right? It's like, oh, sign in with your Google account, and then it's like, hey, do you want to connect like your email and your Google Drive and all that? Like, oh, yes. And now like company data is like who knows where, right? So, we'll expand into a lot more of that. But don't forget your employees, right? Your people, and this one's an interesting one. We've been toying around with playing, you know, calling it MDR for employees. It's really like how do you train and protect your employees. So like today we have security awareness training, and in the future we're going to expand that to even more stuff to try and really solve some of that problem because as bad as it sounds, people, humans, they're always the weakest link, right? And then ideally, you could buy the managed XDR bundle from Huntress and get all of these things.
I don't know if I kind of, I mean, like sometimes I take issue and sometimes I totally get it, but the humans are the weakest link is always kind of it's a divisive sentence, but humans are for sure the biggest attack surface. And like
Yeah.
whether they are the weakest link or not, they increase the attack surface a lot. So yeah, MDR for employees, hardening the humans, right? And making sure that they can spot a phishing email when it lands in their inbox and they have awareness for the other security concepts. So yeah, definitely the biggest attack surface, maybe the weakest link, but definitely the biggest attack surface.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, MDR for logs. Mentioned that briefly. It's not a thing that you will find today on the website or anything. This is kind of our announcement for folks who come to these kind of things. You'll be getting in early on some of this stuff. This is a new product that we're going to build, or that we are in the process of building today. And the idea is how do we kind of check that last box that we feel like we don't have to really qualify and to call everything a SIM, and that's how do we collect logs. So we're gonna collect logs, but we're gonna do it in the Huntress way, right? We're not gonna try to imitate all these other vendors and try to just collect everything and we'll sort it out later, or we'll throw AI at it, or whatever. How can we build like the Huntress capabilities? And so we always think about the 80-20 rule. How can we ingest the stuff that provides the most value and not? And so like if 20% of the data is that high signal data that really tells you if something bad is happening, that's the stuff that we want to ingest. That's the stuff that we want to spend time with the CPU usage, processing, parsing, storing, and making it available. And then that other 80% of the data that's really just like not that useful, right? Think of it as like benign logs and stuff like that. Like imagine a log that just told you the disk on this user's laptop is almost full. Okay, and like what do I do with that? Like I don't really care, right? So like that's there. How do we take that data, still be able to potentially collect it? Ideally not, but if we are going to collect it, how do we just put it somewhere cheap? Put it in cold storage, not run it through all the processors and all the parsing, and not try to hunt on it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, log retention, big part of the equation here. It's like how are we gonna have those logs stick around and retain them?
Yep. So Chad was asking how are we going to collect it? So there's kind of two stages. There's some here in the release milestones. The first stage is like we're going to use the existing Huntress agent to be able to collect the data. We actually have had this built into the agent for quite a while. It was not turned on. We didn't have anywhere on the back end to like really store the logs in bulk and all that. We were really only looking at one or two events to try and identify when users logged in, but the vast majority of the data we were dropping on the floor. So we're going to continue to use the Huntress agent to do that. Some of the nice part about that is the other things that come with the agent, and the ability that it automatically updates, it calls back for tasking. We can give it remediations to do things, go change things, set them up, and we can use it to configure the systems. And one of the things that we found a lot from talking with either internally through like the security researchers and folks like Matt, or externally through our sales engineers and through our partners, was that it was very easy and in fact maybe common even for people to modify the configuration for the Windows event logs such that it did not generate that much data and was not generating some of the more interesting data that would equate to signal that would help us find attackers. So using the Huntress agent, just like we've done to configure other things like Defender, we can set that configuration there. Okay, so that's kind of the first way. The second thing that we're going to do is open it up for syslog. So we'll create a syslog endpoint. So any of your devices that can generate logs and send them to a syslog endpoint, we will accept them. And so yeah, so that brings us to like the 3 milestones. So we've tried to break up like how are we going to build this into some milestones where we can continue to ship stuff and iterate on it. So first we'll do a private preview where we'll bring some of our partners in, who have helped us and given us feedback, and people who are really interested in, getting on board here, but are, not saying, hey, I don't even want to touch that until it has, all these things. March 15th is the date that we're targeting. That's like a Friday. So ideally on the Monday there, the 18th, we would actually start rolling it out. But like I said, we should have the capabilities to collect logs, some basic UI. Our analysts will be able to review these again to get some of that additional context that we've always been talking about. And then some of those high risk events will generate signals ideally. Then from there, we'll go to a public beta in the middle of May, where we'll try to extend what we have to add in things like syslogs, searching capability, exporting of logs for incidents and stuff like that, as well as really connect it up to our threat detection framework so that we can start pumping a lot of stuff through, and our detection engineers can just start plugging away at making rules to find the bad stuff so that we can report it. And then ideally we should get to general availability July 1st. And so this is when we would really have what we would consider something solid that like we would start to charge for. So both private preview and public beta will be free and not charging, because we were trying to learn and get feedback from folks who are using it. But once we go into general availability, we would charge, and ideally then we would have remediations as well as some first party integrations to firewalls to import logs. I saw some folks in chat were asking which firewalls. I'd love some feedback on this. I've heard different things of like Fortinet or SonicWall, but we don't really have good data on like firewall usage. So I can't really look at our like existing customers and say, oh, well, 80% would be covered if we just did SonicWall or something. I don't know. And so, so we got a couple of those, and then ideally better together with EDR. So there's some stuff that we can see on the EDR side. There's some stuff that we don't have full insight into. Like we can see that RDP is spun up and somebody's using it, but if you go to the event logs, the Windows will actually drop a lot more information about what user, where are they coming from, what ports, all of that. There's a lot more detail into what they're using. So these are kind of our release milestones that we are targeting.
And so, like, one thing I want to point out is that there are a lot of ways that you can use different telemetry sources to attack and approach different things. So, like, you can use the PowerShell logs as a proxy to look at lateral movement, right? But is there a better way to approach that problem? Is network telemetry the better way to approach that? So there are lots of different like avenues for the logs that you actually bring in to actually go out and proactively hunt down this evil. And some of them are going to be extremely expensive. Why bring in the PowerShell logs if you can look at network telemetry or vice versa, right? So it's just it's all part of this calculus of like what, going back to the 80/20 rule, like what are the things that we want to go after that will get us the most bang for our buck, that where we don't have to like flood ourselves with these logs.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So the maybe the contentious part, and I've had a number of conversations about this, both internally and externally, with a lot of partners, but always looking for more feedback, is the debate on usage based or per user based billing. And so I kind of tried to lay out some of the differences here in terms of like what are the benefits and the drawbacks of them. And the one that kind of always comes back when you talk about a lot of the existing SMB vendors is they charge per user, and that makes it easy for you to figure out how much you're going to pay, right? It's easy to calculate and count up how many employees do I have. Okay, X times some number is how much I'll pay for SIM, right? And my number of employees doesn't change wildly, right? I don't like have 100 1 month and then 300 the next month and then back down to 75 the month after, right? Like that doesn't happen, and maybe it does some places, but most places no. Right, but like you can get that with usage based billing, where like 1 month you do generate a lot of logs for whatever reason. Maybe you changed something, maybe something happened, you were getting brute force, like whatever it is, like you'll have some of these spikes. um, but I think there's advantages in the user based or the usage based billing over the user based billing in that it better aligns with the value, right? You're only paying for what you're using. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who said, yeah, we got, 200 employees. They got all these inboxes, but most of them work, out in the field or they're doing this or whatever. And so they're not there to really generate log data, right? And so you're paying for those folks, and they're generating like nothing. And the vendors who are charging this they're trying to come up with a per user price that has to be high enough because they don't know actually how many logs you're going to send, right? So they got to try to even out between the users who generate a lot of logs and the users who generate a little logs, like somewhere we got to find the middle there, average it out. And that's hard. And so it results in like a higher per user cost. And so we think, and this is just a draft, again, we're looking for feedback. We think actually building on a usage base is better, right? So you're only going to be billed for the logs you collect based on how many gigabytes. We'll store the raw logs for a year. We'll give 30 days availability for search and reviews. You can go back and look at the logs. If you need longer than that, I've talked to some folks who are like, hey, I need 7 years of log retention. You can purchase that, and we'll just keep, instead of 1 year in cold storage, we'll keep 7, right? Um, and um, and this doesn't include the EDR and M365 data. So I want to be clear that this is logs, right? We're capturing a bunch of stuff for the EDR data, the process data, the footholds. We're capturing all of the events from M365. Those are separate. Those don't count toward this. So you don't have to worry about that. This is really just like event logs, anything you're sending over syslogs and your firewall logs. And we're going to do a tiered pricing based on some minimum value, just like we've done for all of the other things that we've sold. So, I don't know what the tiers are or the prices today. That's still trying to be figured out. But, we'll probably have something like 100 gigs, 500 gigs, a terabyte, 5 terabytes, right? And each of those, as you go up and say, hey, I'm going to commit to 5 terabytes of logs a month, your per gigabyte price will go down, right? It'll get cheaper for you. And then we're going to let you aggregate the log volume across the account. And so for like mid-market and direct customers, it's typical, like that's how you would expect. But for service providers, they can start to get some benefits there because they're charging their end customers. And some of the things that we've looked at, there are minimums, right? Where Some of the vendors will say, hey, each of your customers needs to be spending this much money or that much money or whatever. We're just going to let you do it across the whole thing. So put some examples over here on the side in terms of what does that mean if you add customers who are logging more, your per gigabyte cost goes down, which is good. If you can get like, say one of your really large customers, one of your really large tenants to go in and get logs, suddenly you're at this much higher tier. You can offer that at a better price to some of your smaller tenants. So there's a lot there. Would really love feedback on this. If you haven't already, you can give feedback at feedback.huntress.com. There's a couple of different threads on SIM or logs and stuff there. Probably this week, I'm going to try to collapse those and merge several of the threads into a single, MDR for logs thread. So you can give us feedback there. You can also give us feedback just sending it to support. So support at huntress.com, and they'll make sure that gets to the right folks. So that's what
Join the
we
fun.
got for slides for you today. So join the fun,
Join the fun.
come
Yeah.
in. If you're not already, we would encourage you to join some of our other shows that we have, and like Tradecraft Tuesday
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
is
I've been
always a
doing a
great
few of
one.
the Tradecraft Tuesdays lately. But yeah, come through. They've been a really good time. We've done like any desk persistence and all manner of crazy M365 attacks. So Chris, we got a couple questions left here.
Yeah.
So Tanner, we had an incident generated for one of our 365 users because someone created a rule with too short of a name. The rule was legitimate and the name was Unify. What determines if human evaluation is needed on an incident? So one of the principal challenges at Huntress, and actually one of the reasons why I love working here so much, is that the diversity of the organizations that we service is like the broadest it's ever been in my whole life. So we need to write detectors that work for like one person strawberry milkshake shops that also work for like small to medium like healthcare providers, right? So every step along the way there's going to be some kind of human interaction. We're fully managed, right? So we're always going to get human eyes on some detector when it goes off. Now, whether that is a high quality signal that lands in the SOC's queue, or whether it's a signal that we realize that we really need to tune because it's generating too much noise. I mean, that's like part of my job is to get that ratio kind of right. But those kinds of activities, so like what you were talking about, the RSS rule landing in the inbox, I mean, that is like quintessential hacker tradecraft, and we get a pair of human eyes on it with that awesome human brain to say, "Oh, this actually just looks like a rule that they were setting up." We would, in a lot of cases, we would rather be maybe just a little bit noisier if it means that when we scrutinize those rules taking place, it actually nets us, bags us, and tags us those hackers. So like I said earlier, the signal to noise ratio for M365 specifically is a little bit higher right now than I think we'd all like it to be, but we're working on getting that into a manageable level.
Yeah. And some of the additional context matters. Like the rule is not, or at least it should not just be based on, hey, this the name of the inbox rule was too short, right? That may be something that causes us to look into it, but we should also be looking at the other things in terms of like, what is the rule doing, right? Is the rule moving it into the RSS feed? Is the rule moving it into like deleted messages? Is the rule forwarding it to bob@evil.com, right? Like, so without like more info, it's hard for me to say exactly why somebody looked at that unify rule and felt like it was bad. But like Matt said, some of it is just like we're trying to err on caution, right? And we don't know, do you use unify and that's why you have it, or is that just an attacker trying to use a word that seems relevant and common? We kind of have to make those decisions, and they're hard to make, right? I, I've been on the other side of being an analyst, and you look at some of these and you're like, that could be fine, but it could also be not. Like,
Iffy,
how the heck
yeah.
am I supposed to know?
Always iffy, always the shades of gray.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that's a tough position to be in. But our SOC analysts do an amazing job. They're world class, and Especially everything I do in my job here is in service to them to make their jobs easier so they can do what they do best. Let's
Yep.
see what else.
We got
AI agent for SOC SIEM capabilities on the roadmap. I know how you feel about AI specifically, Chris. So if you want to go ahead and answer this one.
so I'm a very practical like theory's nice, but like how does it work in practice
Yeah.
kind of person. And so this is where I have most of my issues with AI, right? Like in theory it sounds really good. But like in practice it's usually like not that good. It's not as good as you expect. And there's been a
Yeah.
lot of like research on this recently. I just saw somebody was posting the other day on Twitter about folks trying to use AI for doing bug hunting and discovery. And so they would take a known case of like there was this bug. Could we give the source code to like Chat GPT and could it figure it out? And it did, right? They gave it the source code and figured it out. And you could take that as like, oh my God, Chat GPT can find bugs, whatever. Then they took that same exact source code, they went in and just renamed variables. So they renamed a variable to cool guy all throughout the throughout the code, and suddenly ChatGPT knew nothing about it, and everything it output was gibberish, right?
Classic.
Uh, and so for us, we've always stayed away from AI um, for some of those reasons, but a lot of it is because it goes against kind of what we believe. Like the reason AI is thrown around by a lot of vendors is because their approach is consume everything, bring in as much data as we can. And it's too much for individuals to look at, it's too much to sort through, whatever. But if you just take this magical AI and
Yeah.
throw AI at it, it'll figure it out. Right. And like
Yeah.
we just saw over and over and over, it didn't work.
The pragmatic attack first approach is when targeted and used elegantly so much more effective than this like broad AI fixes everything approach, right? And so that's what we try to go through first is to uh look at the attacks as they take place that actual hackers are performing in a tradecraft sense and hard counter those tactics, right? And then we start to go after the proactive stuff to find areas that we need more telemetry or we need more capabilities that we don't quite see the attacks, but they're happening. Threat intel, we read a lot of CTI going around the Huntress Slack channels. If those approaches fail, maybe I'm never going to say never, but like maybe AI, we could bring somebody in. I certainly don't have the chops for it. I'm not particularly good at statistics.
Yeah.
But we take the how are the attacks unfolding first, and how do we hard counter those with the telemetry that we have or the telemetry that we could have if we built out a capability.
Yeah. We got a couple of questions on Defender for Endpoint integration and how that was going. What was the status of that? We are still working on it. We kind of actually had to put it on pause just for a little bit to go back and really refine some of the M365 stuff. And so we felt like it was more important to put the effort there and make sure that was really solid and it was detecting things. And, we had worked through some of the kinks that we had had previously. And so during that time, like the Defender for Endpoint stuff just kind of sat. But we do have a proof of concept. We are able to actually connect to the Defender APIs and pull in alerts and generate signals from them. So we've actually just hired some folks who started yesterday. One of the folks did who will be on my team who will actually be picking up that proof of concept where I left it off and be moving forward with it. So
Nice.
expect to see that as something coming probably later this year, next couple of months maybe.
Sweet.
But ideally, what we had told people is we were going to start a beta. We had to push that beta back for obvious reasons. We didn't have the product, so in the next couple of months, we should be starting that beta. What else we got here? How much more detail does VPN logs detected through Huntress compared to the logs recorded in Entra M365?
So, we I don't think you get any telemetry about VPNs from, and I could be wrong about this at different like license stratas, but I don't think you get any insight about VPN specific activity from Entra, where we derive our VPN intel is from Spur. So we use a third-party IP enrichment service, right? And so what Spur does is they look at IPs out on the open internet and classify them into things like anonymous proxy, VPN, data center, for those IT departments that use like spin up a lot of instances of VPSs or droplets or something like that. So that's where we get all of our intel. We had to use a third party for that because there is like I don't think Entra is aware which IPs correspond to VPN providers. They don't really care. There's no need for them to furnish that kind of information. So that's where we get our intel. And so and that's why it's like the approach to M365 is much more about building context than it is about atomic indicators, like it might be on the endpoint side, right? So part of that context is built with Spur.
Yeah. And I think Microsoft does some stuff here, but they don't say what it is. So they have the concept of a risky sign-in, and you can actually, if you have the P2 licenses, which are the more expensive ones, they'll actually denote whether or not a login is what they consider risky. Now they don't say what goes into it. Right? They don't say how they're deciding if it's risky or not. My guess is it does have something to do with VPNs and IP addresses and where they've seen attackers come from before.
Mm.
And you can use that if you have that license level. You can use that in conditional access to say if block all risky sign-ins.
Yeah.
That's a thing that you can do. But
And like
yeah,
part of our approach is like we know that a lot of SMBs are not going to have those licensing levels, so we're kind of like doing that for them, right? Like we'll provide the alerts that say this is a risky sign in just based on our own enrichments, right?
yeah,
Regardless of what Microsoft might classify it as, if everybody had the license for it, that would be amazing, but they don't. So we have to make the call as the people watching out for our partners.
yeah. We're just over. Maybe we do one more, and then we'll go. So Jeffrey asked, how can a global enterprise manage this location access if users access from multiple locations?
Yeah, so there's like the Huntress side answer of this and the IT administrator side answer of this. So for the Huntress side, we're collecting those stats based on logins, right? So if your team spans the globe and people are logging in from like Jakarta and like Nigeria and Mexico and all over the place, like we'll build profiles or we'll collect the stats for those profiles as they go. Now on the other side of that, the IT admin side, I mean, I haven't been a sysad for a very long time now, and I was a sysad before the crazy time of cloud administration. But yeah, your logins can be locked down by conditional access policies if you have the licensing requirements for it. So you can allow list or deny list based on the entity's location. Yes, this person logs in from Lagos, that's fine. This person logs in from Jakarta. Allow listing is always like there's no like one best approach to it. Maybe deny listing is the way to go. Maybe allow listing is the way to go. That's kind of just a personal, not personal, but like a business decision that you have to make.
Yeah. Yeah, the way that we're doing some of this is we're actually tracking from each location how many events have we seen. So how many, not just logins, but any event that we get from M365. So it could be a login, it could be a user added, it could be a change here, there, whatever. And we use those to build the profile. So if you have somebody who say routinely travels from New York to London, right, and they work in both places and they're there often, what will happen is like say we've only ever seen them log in from New York, that will be their profile. The very first time we see them log in from London, it'll go to our SOC analysts. Hey, first time login from a new
Yeah.
place, like something you might want to look at. And again, that's where they exercise their judgment and try to decide, okay, is this potentially just a user who is either on vacation or working from a different global office or whatever?
Yeah.
If there have been any other malicious stuff, if there is, then maybe we lock it down. But if there's not, we kind of look at it. Now, as that user continues to work from London, the amount of events from London will start to go up.
Yeah.
And at some point, when they go back and forth, we will see that as these are two very common places for this user to sign in and to work from. And so it just automatically takes
Yeah.
care of that.
And
Now, say
yeah.
they instead travel to Japan, again, we're back to that. first time someone's logged in from a new place, and then we'll review it
Yeah.
again.
And our tolerances are built to account for that, right? And so like we're fighting initial access. And so like any of the indicators that amount to initial access are all part of the puzzle. Our detectors have tolerances for that kind of thing. For an example, for what Chris was talking about, if they actually travel to Japan, that's not technically impossible travel, right? Because they will be in Japan having traveled from London, and the time frame there will make sense for that. So like that's one of the cases where we have to account for things like that. But yes, our detectors have tolerances for that. It's the very low percentile locations that usually trigger the detectors.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for coming and joining us for another episode of the Product Lab. Hopefully you learned some interesting stuff. Hopefully we piqued your interest on some of these new things. If you got any other questions, things you want us to cover, you can email support and just say, hey, I'd love to see a Product Lab episode about this or that, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah,
Same goes
come
for Tradecraft Tuesday.
yeah, come through for Tradecraft Tuesday. Always a good time. No pitches during Tradecraft Tuesday. Just straight up, what are the hackers doing? How do they carry it out? That kind of fun stuff. So yeah, thanks for hanging out, everybody. Thank you.